Hey friends, we're Kenny and Elle, and we're the creators of Grow Kids, the children's ministry curriculum and annual strategy from Stuff You Can Use.
And in this video, we are going to show you how to strategically plan an entire year of kids ministry in 6 key areas. Those are discipleship, teaching, environments, events, families, and volunteers.
We're going to use a lot of examples from Grow in this video, but you don't actually have to use Grow curriculum in order to find this video helpful. Whether you use our curriculum or not, this video will teach you a strategy that you can use, and we're going to share with you all of our secrets because we like you.
That's true. But if you are using Grow curriculum in your ministry, this video is going to give you a really big head start in planning your whole year. It's going to help you see how all of the pieces of your curriculum, and there are a lot of them, how they all fit together, and why we place them on the calendar in the places where we place them.
And now you could watch this video on your own, but we highly recommend going through this video with some other members of your team so that you all can collaboratively plan your year together. And for you Grow users, we made this easy by giving you physical and printable versions of every single card you're going to see in this video so that you can build your very own board.
And then when you are done with all of that, you are going to have this big, awesome, detailed, visual, beautiful representation of everything you're going to be doing in your ministry this year. It's going to help you stay on track. It's going to help you keep your team in the loop. And bonus, it is definitely going to help impress your boss.
Yes, and in fact, right now you're seeing some of the calendars that Grow users have made for their own ministries on the screen behind us.
Yeah, and just a reminder, everything that you will hear about in this video is actually available as a resource that you can customize and then use in your ministry through Grow curriculum. So that's every teaching series, theme, event, discipleship activity, all the meetings, discussions, conversations, celebrations. Everything that you hear about is included in Volume 8 of Grow curriculum.
So, if you're not only looking for the strategy, but also for the resources to pull all of this off, just head to growcurriculum.org for some free samples and more information. All right, ready to get started? Let's do this. All right, let's go over those 6 key areas again: discipleship, teaching, environments, events, volunteers, and families. Right now, we're going to start by unpacking our annual discipleship strategy. And we start with discipleship because we want spiritual growth to be the lens through which we see everything else we're going to do this year. Your church might have its own approach to discipleship and spiritual formation, but here's how we approach it. And of course, feel free to borrow this if it works for you. We believe that there are 4 spiritual habits that help all of us, kids and teenagers included, grow closer to God. And they are spend time with God, spend time with others, know and use your gifts, and share your story. Now, these 4 habits aren't anything new, and you may already be talking about them in your own unique way. So, feel free to change the language to fit your context because the words are not the important thing here. What is important is making a plan to help kids and teenagers engage in these 4 spiritual habits on a regular basis, year after year, so they can continue to grow closer to God. So, in the Grow annual strategy, we break our year into 4 quarters and assign 1 spiritual habit to each quarter. Then, with the spiritual habit in mind, we spend 3 months creating experiences, activities, and tools to help kids and teenagers grow in that area. Because these habits are so significant, we found the most strategic places for these habits to live on your calendar. You may have noticed we like to color code things around here, and we use the color orange on our calendar for our discipleship strategy. Every fall, we focus on spending time with others because it's the time of year when kids are already thinking about the friendships they're making and the people they spend time with. They move into new schools, moving up a grade, starting new classes, joining new teams. There is just so much changing in their social lives each fall that it's the perfect opportunity to get them thinking about the spiritual habit of engaging in Christ-like community with others. This year in Grow Kids, we're giving you everything you need to make small group party kits. Now, these kits are basically a party in a box that make it easy for your volunteers to plan and pull off their own super fun themed small group parties. Whether their kids are into Legos, camping, the indoor version, slime, or just hanging out and eating cool snacks, there's a party kit for that. And every winter, we focus on the habit of knowing and using your gifts because the Christmas holidays are coming up, which means your community is filled with opportunities to serve and give. This year in Grow Kids, we're providing everything you need to do a holiday fundraiser called the Joy Drive. With this activity, you'll partner with a local organization you believe in, and kids will get a chance to gather donations in lots of fun and generous ways. And then every spring, after you've built some trust with kids and families over the course of the year, we think that's the perfect time to go deeper by focusing on the spiritual habit of spending time with God. This year, to help you with that, we've created an activity called Grow with God Experience, which is designed to go along with this year's Easter series called Full Bloom. In this garden-themed interactive walk, kids will walk through the Easter story and connect with God in new ways along the way. And lastly, we have the spiritual habit of sharing your story. We focus on the spiritual habit every summer because it's the time of year when a lot of churches are often thinking about mission experiences. Plus, it's a great time to get kids thinking and excited about the upcoming new school year and all of the ways that they share the story of Jesus with others in the upcoming months. This year in Grow Kids, we're providing an activity called the What's Next Challenge, which goes along with our series on the early church called What's Next. In this challenge, kids will use their creativity to think about and communicate who Jesus is to them and how God wants them to change the world. So that's what the Grow Discipleship strategy looks like. Now it's your job to take these ideas and make them fit within your unique context, or come up with your own discipleship ideas and work out some of the details of what this might look like for you. Next, we're going to talk about your teaching strategy.
Each year, it is so important to plan ahead for the topics and scripture that you plan to cover with your kids. It's really tempting to spend your Wednesday afternoons Googling free kids ministry sermons or punching some weird prompts into an AI generator, but we think you can do a lot better than that, and we are here to help. The thing is, when we fail to plan ahead with our teaching calendar, we run the risk of missing some really important ideas, of teaching only the things that interest us personally, and ultimately failing to give kids a full and holistic view of who God is. And that is a really big deal. So please plan ahead. Now, there are so many ways to approach a scope and sequence for kids, but here's how we do it. The Grow Scope and Sequence will take kids through every major Bible story in 3 years. The Old Testament is always taught chronologically over the course of all 3 years, while the New Testament is taught chronologically every year, but with different stories every time we go through that cycle. We will always switch from Old Testament to New Testament stories in December with the birth of Jesus, and then switch back to the Old Testament in June, which is 6 months later. Then, when all 3 of those years are up, we will start all over again in the same order. And we spend an equal amount of time in the Old Testament as we do in the New Testament. So once you have all of the stories that you want to cover all identified, you're going to want to place them on the calendar in order. But this is really, really big. Don't forget to consider how you can strategically align your teaching calendar with the spiritual habits that you're focusing on every quarter. This is why you're putting everything up on one board all at one time, so you can see how every aspect of your ministry all works together. Now, here's a quick overview of this year's teaching calendar from Grow Kids curriculum and why we've placed every teaching series where we've placed them on the calendar. If you're starting Grow for the very first time, we always recommend starting with a series called Blast Off. The series is the one that covers all 4 of the spiritual habits of our discipleship strategy. With Blast Off, you will give kids a look at all 4 spiritual habits by looking at 4 stories from the Gospels and how those stories teach us some really important truths about each spiritual habit 1 week at a time. For this video, we are going to assume August is the beginning of a new school year for you, but if you happen to be in a hemisphere where your school year starts in January, that is totally okay. With Grow and with this whole strategy, you can get started any time. It is all customizable. And also, just a note, we use the color red on the Grow calendar for our teaching strategy. So in August, that is where we really kick things off with the Grow Kids Scope and Sequence and with a new school year. So in our fall quarter, we always cover Old Testament stories with New Testament connections. This August, it is a series on David from 1st and 2nd Samuel, and this series is called Game Plan, where we're going to talk about God's game plan, not only for David's life, but also for the whole world and for our lives too. Then in September, we will cover the story of Solomon and the building of God's temple with a series that is called Under Construction. And then, to wrap up the first quarter in October, we will talk about the story of Job in a series that is called Along the Way. And in the series, we're going to help kids see that God is with them no matter where life takes them. In November, we'll wrap up our time in the Old Testament with a series about Ruth and Naomi called Unsung Heroes that will take us all the way through the book of Ruth. Then in December, we'll transition into the New Testament with a Christmas series called Joy Story. In this series, we are going to tell all the classic Christmas stories from Scripture, but with a focus on how joyful we can be because Jesus was born. Then in January, now that we are in the New Testament half of our year, we will do a series called Camp Believe It, which is all about Jesus' early life and ministry and 4 things that we can all believe about who Jesus is. And that wraps up our winter quarter. Then, to kick off our spring quarter in February, we are doing another series from the New Testament, and this one is called Miraculous. This series is about 4 of Jesus' miracles and what each of those miracles teach us about who Jesus is. After that, in March, we will do a series that is called Big Picture, and this series is going to showcase 5 parables that Jesus told and what the big picture of each of those stories is. So that is 4 months spent in the New Testament so far, but we still have 2 to go before we switch back to the Old Testament. So in April, our Easter series is called Full Bloom, and this series helps kids see how Jesus' death and resurrection brings us new life. Then in May, we will kick off our summer quarter and we'll wrap up our time in the New Testament as well with a series on the early church. And this series is called What's Next, where kids are going to discover that many of the next steps that were taken by the early church to share the good news of Jesus are the same next steps that we can take today. Then, for the rest of the summer, we're going to head back to the Old Testament for 2 more series. In the month of June, we've got a series called Fired Up, which is all about the prophet Elijah. And then finally, in July, the series Imagine That will introduce us to the prophet Elisha. So that is 2 back-to-back series about the amazing things that God did in and through these prophets and the amazing things that God wants to do in and through all of us too. So that's what our teaching strategy looks like for this year, but you get to go make this strategy work for you. So go look at your church calendar, figure out what stories and books of the Bible that you want to teach, in what order and in which months. Find out if your church is maybe doing any church-wide campaigns or teaching series that will affect your kids, and then adjust accordingly. Oh, and think about the rhythms of your kids and your community as well, and make adjustments that will fit your church and your community's very unique needs. And also, don't forget to compare what you are teaching to your discipleship strategy to see how you can use both of those strategies to support and to reinforce each other. And remember, this is all customizable, all of it. So take the things that work for you and then adjust the things that don't work for you. The point is this: you need a teaching strategy. And when you align your teaching strategy with your discipleship strategy, you will be able to focus and reinforce those big ideas so much more effectively. So go ahead, make it your own, and then start dreaming about some of the specifics of what your teaching could maybe look like this upcoming year. In the next part, we are going to talk about your weekly environments.
All right, as you start to develop your teaching strategy in more detail, let's start adding some interesting weekly environment elements, things like special decor, songs, activities, or crafts to enhance that month's teaching. So this is important because the right environment can help your teaching really stick in the minds of your kids. In this round of planning, we're going to assign a monthly decorating theme to each teaching series that directly complements what you're teaching, and we're using the color yellow for these cards. And when we say themes, there is a lot that we could include. Things like decor, graphics, music, special funny characters, costumes, props, puppets, activities, playlists. The possibilities are pretty endless. But remember, if you're using Grow Kids curriculum, we've thought through all of this for you. And if you're not using Grow, that's cool. Feel free to steal our ideas and make them happen on your own. Either way, here are the monthly themes that we're doing in Grow this year and how they connect to what we're teaching. For the introductory series, Blast blast off, which you get as a little freebie since we're talking about how to launch your faith in Jesus to greater heights, will be using the theme of rocket ships in outer space. Think space theme activities, games, decor, and graphics that use planets and stars and rocket ships, coloring pages, object lessons. All of that stuff will be outer space themed. And then when we talk about King David in August series game plan, we'll use a sports theme to talk about what David's story reveals about God's plan and how we can all be a part of it. When we cover the story of Solomon in our series Under Construction, we'll use a construction theme to talk about how Solomon built God's temple and how we can build our lives on God. When we tell the story of Job and along the way, we'll use a travel theme to talk about how we can follow God and how God is always with us no matter where life takes us. For our series on Ruth called Unsung Heroes, we'll talk about all the amazing things God gives us to help us be heroic in Jesus' name, just like Ruth and Naomi were. That's why we're using a superheroes theme for this one. Our Christmas series is a little nod to a certain toy-related movie franchise you've probably heard of. It's called Joy Story, and it has a toy theme, but with the super important message that the best Christmas gift isn't more cool stuff. It's Jesus. Then, in Can't Believe It, our series on Jesus' early life and ministry, we're using a camping theme to talk about the adventure of choosing to believe and follow Jesus. In Miraculous, we're looking at 4 of Jesus' miracles that all have to do with water and fish. That's why this series has a really fun aquarium theme. For our series on Jesus' teaching called Big Picture, we're using a movie theme to bring to life 5 really important stories, also known as parables, that Jesus taught. And then our Easter series, Full Bloom, takes a springtime feel but with a kid-friendly twist. We'll be talking about gardens since Easter is all about new life, but larger than life gardens. Then, What's Next, our series on the early church, will use the theme of mazes and puzzles to talk about how Jesus' early followers had to follow God's lead to figure out what to do and where to go next with the good news of Jesus. And the same is true for us today. Then, as we head back to the Old Testament for Fired Up, we'll use a bakery theme to tell the story of Elijah. That's because there's a lot of food and fire-related stuff happening in Elijah's story, and who doesn't love baked goods? And finally, in Imagine That, we'll use the theme of art to tell the story of Elisha. That's because God used Elisha in some really creative and imaginative ways to make a difference in the world, and God wants to do the same thing with us. All right, and that is the plan for Volume 8 of Grow Kids. And remember, you need a strategy for your weekly environments. And a great way to make your weekly environment more strategic is to give it a theme that complements your monthly teaching. So that's the idea here. Once all your cards are up on your board, you might notice things like, I don't know if this theme is going to fit with our kids. Let's swap it for something else. Or, hey, every June, our church does a big church-wide campaign, so let's change this theme to better connect with what our whole church is doing. Whatever you decide to do for your kids, just remember this. You can be a lot more effective with your teaching by pairing it with a strategic monthly theme. And you can be a lot more efficient by planning those themes in advance a whole year at a time. All right, up next, we're talking events.
Now, we've already covered 3 areas that are all about kids with our discipleship, teaching, and weekly environment strategies. But we've got one more strategy to talk about that relates directly to kids, and that is your event strategy. Now, events are a pretty big deal in most children's ministries. They're a great way to have fun, connect with families, get new people in the door, and also create some excitement about your church. And all of those things are super, super important. But if we are really honest, we probably know that we can overdo it sometimes with our events. You know what I mean? Like, events matter, but we've really got to keep things in perspective and think strategically. That is why we are big fans of keeping your event strategy really, really simple, because you can make a bigger impact every year if you choose to do fewer events with more intentionality. So here is our recommendation for keeping your event strategy super simple in kids ministry. Do one event every quarter, plus a VBS over the summer. That's it. Now, here's what that could look like, and we'll be using green cards for our event strategy on our calendar. So in the fall, we suggest doing a really fun family event. And since this quarter is all about the spiritual habit of spending time with others, maybe use this event as an opportunity to let kids and families strategically connect with each other or with your volunteers. In Grow Kids Volume 8, our fall event is a super fun, larger-than-life board game event that is called Step Into the Game, where kids' favorite games all come to life in brand new ways. Then in the winter, remember that families are probably pretty busy and a little bit short on cash leading up to the holidays. So do a really simple, really fun, and maybe even free event for families that allows them to make some holiday memories together. This year, inside of Grow Kids curriculum, we are doing an event called Merry Mini Golf, and it is an indoor Christmas-themed miniature golf game night that is super fun and easy to put together. Then in the spring and summer, when the weather is warming up and families are looking for some fun things to do outside of the house, do some fun events that get families together and maybe even make those events open to your whole community. So this year in Grow Kids, we are giving you everything you need to plan, first of all, a really fun spin on an Easter egg hunt that is called the Excellent Easter Scramble. That is for the spring, of course. And then for the summer, we've got a team-based event called Ready, Set, Race that will get kids racing for first place. But not just by foot, they will be competing with their teams or with their small groups to solve problems, complete puzzles, and do so much more. It's super fun. And finally, don't forget to add a VBS to your event strategy over the summer. Now, depending on your context, you might do this in May, June, or July, whatever works for you and your VBS rhythm. And hey, every year, Grow Kids actually produces a totally free, complete VBS resource, so you'll have everything you need to make this event happen for free. And you know the drill at this point. Next up, you're going to take your event cards, those are the green ones, you're going to throw them on the board in whatever way works best for your church context, and then you're going to spend some time talking about what each of those events might look like and what your goal for each of those events might actually be in your ministry. Okay? Have fun.
We're convinced there are 7 ways to invest in volunteers and that all 7 of them need to be represented on your annual calendar. It might sound overwhelming at first, but it really doesn't have to be, we promise. In fact, we believe if we want to be effective as pastors and leaders, we need to get really serious about investing in and empowering the volunteers we lead. When we do that, we can multiply our influence, increase the capacity of our ministry, and give kids and teenagers better shots at building a lifelong faith. And all of the research shows us how young people need not just one pastor, but a community of adults who are all investing in them and their faith. Plus, if you want volunteers to invest in kids and teenagers, it's probably a good idea that you invest in your volunteers first. And when planning your year of investment in volunteers, you're going to need to consider these 7 things for volunteers. Here they are: events, meetings, discussion groups, one-on-one conversations, tools, communication, and celebrations. And again, we know that this sounds like a lot, but here's the thing. We can build all 7 of these areas into your calendar in ways that aren't overwhelming. And we get it because we've been pastors and actually developed this strategy while we were still pastors. We know that you don't have countless hours to spend leading volunteers, and we want to help you be really, really intentional about doing things that require the least amount of work for the biggest impact. So, with that in mind, let's break down each of these 7 things and give you an idea of what's included in Grow for each of these areas. First, you have volunteer events. We have just one of these each year in August to kick off the school year. So this volunteer kickoff event is designed to be your one major vision casting moment of the year. It comes with inspiration, practical training, helpful tools, and relationship building to get your team off on the right foot. And with Grow, you already have everything you need to pull it off, so that's amazing. Next, we have meetings. Meetings are any environment where you are training volunteers on a specific subject related to their specific needs as a volunteer. Now, if you can say it in an email, just send an email. You don't always have to call a meeting. Save your meetings for the good stuff, the times when you want to teach, discuss, and spend time with your team. Our recommendation is getting together with your whole team every other month, so that's 6 times a year. With our August kickoff event, we can skip September and put the next meeting in October. Then, since no one wants to have an informational meeting in December, let's replace that meeting with a Christmas party. We can add a meeting in February and April, but since June is the end of the school year, let's have another party. So that's 6 get-togethers with your team throughout the year, including your annual kickoff event and a couple of parties. That means you have 3 windows this year to train your team on some specifics. So what do you want to train them on? If you're using Grow, you have access to tons of volunteer meeting outlines and all sorts of helpful topics. And they all come with discussion questions for your team. So however you want to organize this, that's really up to you. But here's the point. Plan to meet with your team throughout the year in a rhythm that works for you. And when you do, teach them something that's really helpful. Next, we have discussion groups. A discussion group is a type of volunteer get-together that can transform your ministry's volunteer culture. In a volunteer discussion group, instead of training your volunteers like you're the expert, even though, of course, we know you are an expert, the goal is to ask questions that get your volunteers sharing stories, talking to each other, and helping each other solve problems. These discussion groups are about spotlighting your volunteers as the experts and learning from and with them for a change. How many of these groups you do each year will depend on how many volunteers you have. We recommend doing them at least once a year, but no more than 6 times. And when you do them, schedule them during months when you don't already have an event, a meeting, or a party scheduled. All right, next we've got one-on-one conversations with volunteers. These conversations are another way to connect with your volunteers, and we recommend putting these on your calendar every single week if you can, or at least every month. In these one-on-one meetings, the goal is to give feedback to your volunteers about how they're doing and to receive feedback from them about how your ministry is doing at equipping and supporting them. Next, we have one of my favorite ways to invest in volunteers, and those are celebrations. We are big believers that what you celebrate in ministry gets repeated, and that honoring your volunteers for who they are is a huge part of creating a volunteer culture that makes people want to serve with you. So, each month we recommend celebrating a weird holiday with your volunteers in a way that appreciates them or makes a fun memory with them. Maybe that's a DIY cupcake decorating station on National Cake Decorating Day, or a mysterious thank you card that can only be read in the mirror for Backwards Day. Whatever it is, the point is that you take time each month to make your volunteers feel cared for. And sending weekly thank you notes and monthly birthday cards are also a great idea. Next, we've got communication. Because if you're going to invest well in your volunteers, you need to communicate with them at least every week. So we've given you all the emails for the entire year already written and designed, tons of volunteer tip videos, and a social media plan with images and captions already done for you to help you stay in touch. We've also got volunteer devotionals that go along with every single teaching series, so volunteers can follow along with a weekly devotional and grow alongside the teenagers that they lead. And last but not least, volunteer tools. And by this, we mean any resource you give your volunteers that make their jobs easier. On the calendar, you'll see volunteer tools like a volunteer handbook, volunteer business cards, a volunteer survey, volunteer goals, and volunteer t-shirts. We suggest giving these tools away in August to begin the year and then refreshing them throughout the year or at your volunteer meetings. And you're done. A full year of volunteer strategy. Now, feel free to copy as much of our strategy and calendar as you want and then change the rest to fit your unique context. We hope that this volunteer strategy honestly revolutionizes your ministry for the better because remember, you're not just a pastor to kids or teenagers. You are a pastor to your volunteers and, as well, we'll talk about in the next section, families too.
Okay, friends, you are almost there. The very last thing that you need to strategize in your annual planning meeting is the thing that sometimes we all save until last, which is how you will engage parents, caregivers, and families. Now, when it comes to families, let's be honest, we could probably all do a better job of engaging them, but we are about to unpack a framework for your family strategy that you can replicate and improve upon every year to help you level up how you engage with families. So here we go. We are convinced that the key to engaging and investing in parents and caregivers is to plan an annual strategy in 7 ways. And they're the same 7 things that we actually just talked about with volunteers. They are family events, parent meetings, parent discussion groups, one-on-one conversations with parents, parent tools, parent communication, and parent celebration. And when we say parent, by the way, just keep in mind that what we mean is any caregiver who is in a parental role in a kid's life. So let's start with our events. Now, like we already said, we recommend doing the fewest events that you can manage for the biggest impact. Each year, we love the idea of doing just a handful of strategic events for parents, and we include all of those events every year inside of Grow. So in August, there is an open house event that is designed to introduce new families to your ministry and expose them to your ministry philosophy and your ministry strategy. Then in October every year, we recommend doing a parent and small group leader breakfast. And this event is really uniquely designed to help connect parents with the small group leaders of their kids or teenagers. And together, they can better understand their common goal, which of course is influencing and caring for the young person that they both love. And we recommend doing this event in October every year because the school year at that point is already in progress, or maybe your small groups are probably pretty settled at that point and consistent. And there's actually been plenty of time for your small group leaders to meet and connect with families and parents before that event happens. Then every January, we recommend hosting a parent workshop, an event where you provide parents and caregivers practical training on how to love, lead, and disciple their own kids. This year in Grow, our parent workshop is tackling the topic of how to share your stories of faith as a family. And if your church is using both Grow Kids and Grow Students, the parent workshop for both age groups actually aligns really nicely, but they provide training in different age-appropriate ways. Oh, and on top of those annual events that we just mentioned, don't forget that you are already putting on quarterly events for kids and teenagers, so just be sure to think strategically about how to invest in families during all of those events too. Next, we have parent meetings. Now, meetings are any environment where you are delivering information to parents that they really, really need. There shouldn't be like a ton of these on your calendar, though. You might need to maybe call an official parent meeting like before a big event or before a big trip, or maybe during a crisis in your community or during a big transition that might be happening at your church. These are like those crucial moments when you have something really important to share with parents and you want to do it face to face, and it really can't be done in an email. Now, how many meetings that you'll actually need throughout the year and when you'll need them totally depends on what else is going on in your church and when. Next, we've got parent discussion groups. Now, like the volunteer discussion groups, our parent discussion groups are environments where you can get all these parents together to learn from them and learn with them. We recommend doing 1 or 2 of these parent discussion groups every year, just whenever your least busy months are for families. Once you've got parents in the room, we want you to ask questions that will tap into their expertise as parents. What can you learn from them? What are their biggest struggles as parents? How can you better serve them as a church and as a ministry? Next, we've got one-on-one conversations with parents. Now, kind of like our parent meetings, these conversations with parents aren't necessarily things that you can plan for super far in advance. They're usually things that happen kind of unexpectedly. This could be because a family is in crisis and needs your help, or maybe it's a response to a concerning behavior you've seen in their kid, or maybe a parent has a question or concern that they really want to talk to you about. You'll probably want to be ready for these to pop up at any time throughout the year because that is how ministry works. But here's a 5th way to invest in families. Just like we talked about the importance of celebrating volunteers, parents really deserve to be celebrated too. Parenting can be really, really difficult sometimes, and your church has the opportunity to help parents feel more seen, more encouraged, and more supported. So every month, we recommend celebrating parents in ways that are inspired by the same weird and silly holidays that you are using to celebrate your volunteers. So while you're setting up a DIY cupcake decorating station for your volunteers on National Cake Decorating Day, maybe just go ahead and set one up for parents too. Or maybe send every parent in your ministry a mysterious, encouraging note that can only be read in the mirror for Backward Day at the same time that you're writing those individual cards for your volunteers. Whatever you do to celebrate parents, the point is that you take time each month to make parents feel seen and feel cared for by your church. And the good news is it doesn't have to be complicated or super time-consuming. Next, we've got communication for parents, because if you're going to invest well in families, you do actually have to communicate with them. We recommend sending parents an email once every month with information about what is happening in your ministry and some resources that will help serve and equip them as parents. In Grow, we've actually written and designed all of these emails for you for one every month, and we've created a ton of parent tip videos that are super cool that you can send to parents every month. Or you could even refilm them with members of your own team if you want to, so we gave you the scripts to do that. We've also got parent devotionals that go along with every single teaching series so that parents can follow a weekly devotional and grow alongside their kid or teenager. And just like we said when we talked about our volunteer strategy, Grow users also get free access to Grow Hubs, which is a communication tool that lets you share information, upcoming events, announcements, and even your curriculum with the families that you serve. And last but not least, we've got parent tools. Now, throughout the year, there are so many helpful and practical tools that you could give parents that would help serve and help equip them. But here are just a few that Grow provides. In August, we recommend giving parents a parent handbook to better understand your ministry's mission and strategy. We recommend giving volunteer business cards with the names and photos and contact information of their kids' adult leaders. You can do this for your staff as well. And also an annual parent survey that will help you learn about how to best serve and communicate with families. We recommend providing all of those same tools again in October at your breakfast event, and also having extras on hand throughout the year for just whenever you need them.
And there you have it. Your final assignment for the day is this: plan out your annual family strategy for the year, and then take a look at everything you've done and accomplished in this planning meeting.
Yeah, and ask yourself a few questions, like, is there anything that you would like to change or tweak now that everything is all visible on your calendar at the same time? Are there any pieces of your calendar that you'd like to get more feedback on before you finalize them? Is there anyone who couldn't make it to this meeting of yours, but whose voice you would really, really like to hear from before you finish all of your planning?
And if you've answered yes to any of those questions, go do something about it. Don't let this become just another project that goes unfinished. This one, really do it and make it awesome. We know that it's a lot to do and think about, but as the year goes on and your calendar fills up, you're going to be so happy that you spent the time now to do this.
Yeah. And with all of that, guys, thank you so much for hanging out with us. But more importantly, thank you for all that you do for your ministry. Your work is so, so important, and we are so excited that you have taken the time to be more intentional and strategic and prepared for this upcoming year of ministry, because it is going to be amazing and you are also amazing.
Yes. All right. We'll see you guys later. Peace.